Wiggling. So today we're gonna cover teaching basic level students, right? And I think that's a challenge that a lot of people have because normally we start by teaching basic level students. To me, it was a little the opposite because like I got to Fisk there and they noticed I spoke English and they were like, hey, do you want to be a teacher? I was 12, 13 years old and I spoke English all my life, but I didn't really know like why I spoke the way I spoke. I didn't understand the grammar rules. And then I had to gradually learn the grammar rules. So I started by teaching advanced classes because it was easier because I had more to do. And then gradually, as I understood grammar more and blah, 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 and then I went on teaching basic level students. But I realized listening to a lot of teachers' trajectories that it's like the opposite. You start by basic, and then as you get more confident with your English, with everything, you start to teach more advanced students, right? So I realize it's a big challenge because, like, how do we fucking make these beginners start speaking? Right? Because it's easy for them to maybe learn separate words, but how do you actually get them to speak English and to evolve? And it's a whole thing. So I wanted to start right off the bat by listening to your challenges, your experiences, because I don't think I can lecture y'all. I need to hear what you're saying, and then we'll go about and comment it. And I have some slides here, obviously, but I always feel like when you bring your experiences, we end up covering everything that's in the slide without me, you know? So please raise your hand if you want to share something that you feel, that you see, that you live about teaching beginners. Okay, Michelle, please tell me what goes on in your beginner land.
So I have a good experience from today's class. I have a beginner student. She's studying since last year with me. And today we reviewed a little of WH questions because she wanted to, but I did in a different way, not the grammar, filling the gaps, blah, blah, blah. I just asked a couple of questions, using, oh, when, why, and she answered like our class, like 50 minutes. She answered everything and she tried to mix Portuguese and English. And I was really proud of her because she's a little bit shy and she's adult, so she tries to translate word by word. But I saw that she wasn't. She didn't need to do that. But I have trouble teaching the basics. For example, when the person doesn't even know the verb to be, how am I going to approach that if they don't know how to answer how are you, for example? So when someone has a quite good level, at least it's fine. But when they like all blank, I don't know what to do sometimes.
Like when they're starting from absolute scratch,
Yeah.
right? What do I do since day one? That is a big challenge for sure. But you know what? I love thinking about the idea of how we evolve our natural speech when we're growing up. Like, first, we learn how to speak about ourselves, and then we start how to speak about others. And then we start to speak about opinions. And then we start to understand the world. Because if you see a 3-year-old kid, they're normally going to be very fluent in speaking about their lives, their family, and all that. But they can't yet talk about like politics, obviously. They can't talk about their opinion about things sometimes yet. Some kids can, right? But others will normally get to that point when they're around 6 or 7. So I see beginner students in the same way. And in the beginning, since day one, my big objective is to make them start to process and explain their existence, you know? So going from the most basic things, which are, for example, who the person is, what their job is, where they live, um, what their routine is like. So to be very honest, for example, my first lesson is always, almost always, not always because it's not a big rule, it's 21 basic questions. You know, there's on my spreadsheet, there's a slide called 21 basic questions. And then I start from there because I ask the person questions like, what do you like? What type of music do you listen to? And then I see first, I assess what they know, what they don't know, their challenges, what that vibe is going to be like. I get a feeling of what they like so that I can bring into the next classes. you know? And then I'm also like already working on giving them the ability to speak about their lives. The second class normally is that frequency one where we talk about like routine, always, usually, never, because that stuff that's in the present, it's easy for them to use also, right? And then I go to maybe conditionals and we use some would and stuff like that. I can send you guys later a class log or two from students that I started from scratch and showing what I did from the beginning to the end. I think that's very useful. But then again, you need to feel your student, but ask them about who they are. If you are able to ask them about who they are, what they do, how they live, then that's the thing. Basic students need to have those abilities because you can't start to give your opinion about, I don't know, Bolsonaro and Lula if you don't know yet who you are. If you can't even say, you know, what your characteristics are, what you believe in. So it's like steps in being constructed. But always from the beginning, using a dynamic approach like you did, Michelle, with like instead of, oh, the grammar of WH questions, you went and you asked them questions, and then I also provoke my students to ask me questions too, and then you gradually present the grammar as it's necessary, not in the way of, okay, today we're going to study about this, but today we're going to use this. So what is this? Have you ever seen this word? What do you think this means? Okay, now let's do it, let's use it, you know because the more practical the better. But I think you already got that. You're already going in the right way. Does that kind of answer your question, me?
Did you talk with me? Sorry, I'm a
Yeah,
little.
does that kind of answer your question?
Oh yeah, sure did. Oh, and I have another example of beginner student, beginner, because when he started, he said, "Oh, teacher, I know just the basics of school." But last week he started the classes in February. Last week he gave his opinion about Angela Davis and oh, I forgot his name. That's a great politician, Carlos. I know you saw my story. I forgot the name of him.
I did
Talking
too, but
about
I know who you're
revolutionary
talking about.
Marighella. He talked about
Yes.
Marighella. So it was really amazing. Like he's the beginner, but he's not. So I'm really excited to this approach is working really.
Oh, I love it. And I love that you didn't limit him to his level because I think that's something that usually happens. We're like, okay, this person is beginner, so they can't handle anything else. Fuck, if you see the person's hungry for more, if you see the person is capable of pushing themselves more, like, yes, go for it. I'm proud of you for doing that. That's so cool.
Thanks. And it's part of the lessons as well. Thanks you too.
Ooh, that is beautiful. I'm honored. I'm really honored. Because that's it, right? It's really about how far the person is willing to go. Like some people, they say, oh, I don't know anything, teacher. But since the first class, they're like, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Yes. But then others, teachers, I don't know anything. Oh, no, I'm so insecure. Oh no, I don't want to say anything. Oh, it's like then you have to overcome so many mental barriers, right? Like that's the biggest thing I think with beginner students, the mental barriers you have to overcome sometimes. But when the person comes like that, like coming in hot and they want to just express themselves, ooh, that makes our job so much easier. So I'm glad you have that student. How about you, Rebecca? What is your experience? What's your stuff with beginner students?
Yes, I feel exactly what Michelle said, and with the challenges and the good part, I think I've experienced very working with amazing students, willing to learn with all this fire, but also challenging students. And right now, I have two challenging students. They have this idea like I'll never learn English. It's too hard. I've tried many times, and maybe English is not really my thing. And I'm trying to deal with all the situation. But also, there is another feeling that I have. I kind of feel guilty sometimes whenever I'm teaching beginners because I use Portuguese quite often, and this is probably due to the way that I learned English in the classroom, where Portuguese, I was not allowed to speak Portuguese at all. So I kind of feel guilty in this process of teaching beginners sometimes. but I'm trying to deal with this as well. But the thing that I want to say is how, I don't know, from your experience with challenging students who have this mental this difficulty process, like I don't know, English is not really my thing, I don't really understand, and I can see they don't really want to learn English, but they need to. So how do you deal with this, especially with beginners? With intermediate students it's quite easier, but with beginners it's a whole different story.
Okay. So I even wrote down the things you said so I can go back and unpack them because I love it. So the first thing and is also connected to the last thing, I think, right? Like you said, the challenging students who don't believe that, oh, like I've never learned English. I don't think English is for me, or I hate English. I don't like English, and blah, 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 blah. I think what I do in this scenario is first and foremost, I embrace the student. Like, especially when the person says, I don't like English, I say, I can totally understand that. And then I validate them and I embrace them with the talk about decolonization. And I'm like, yeah, a fucking course. Me too. I think like you could be learning Tupi Guarani or some shit. You could be learning Spanish, but you have to be learning English. And that fucking sucks. I recognize that it sucks that you shouldn't be, obligated to learn English if you don't want to. But first of all, do you think it's absolutely necessary for you to learn English? Don't you think you could be learning Spanish and working in a company that prioritizes Spanish? No? Okay. So let's do this English learning in a way that empowers you, in a way that doesn't suck, because I can't control the fact that you have to learn English and you don't want to. But I can control like what I can control, no, but I can provide a good learning experience for you so that it's not traumatic because it sucks. But if you want to do this, if you decide that you're gonna do this, there's nobody that's gonna stop you. But I'm here to make the situation better for you because that's ultimately it. Imagine you hate English and then you go to a class and then it's like wizard or some shit like that. And it's like CNA. And it's like, repeat, fill in the gaps. Blah, blah, blah. That's gonna suck balls. But then if you are coming to a class that's like dynamic and it's everything that, it's engaging and it's about conversation and it's like therapy and it feels good and you're being challenged and the teacher sees you, really sees you for who you are and embraces your existence, then that's like another level. So for the people who don't like English, I would embrace them. For the people that believe they will never learn English, I think you can unpack, also embrace them and unpack their trauma. Because there's so much trauma that goes on in education, not just about learning English, but like learning math, for example. Most Brazilians think they're not capable of doing basic math because like math teaching sucks in Brazil. So it's like it's not just that they feel like they can't learn English. I feel that in the system, the educational system cripples them in a way that they feel like they can't learn in general. So it's like this paralyzing sensation that you're stupid and that everything is so much more complex than you can handle. So then it's like you embracing them and you exposing the fact that they had those traumas, but we're here to work on them. We're here to teach them protagonism, to teach them how to actually do these things because they are capable. And it's not like a one-time thing that you're gonna say and they're gonna be like, oh yes. It's gonna be like every fucking class unpacking things. And you're like, at the end of the class, instead of giving feedback, I hate giving feedback at the end of class, Jesus Christ. Instead of giving feedback at the end of the class, a feedback that's like negative or constructive or whatever, I'm like, I noticed that you X, Y, and Z, and that's so cool to me. Or, I know that sometimes you'll feel like uncomfortable, but I'm so proud of you for facing this. Or even if I don't have a lot to compliment, I'm like, I am so proud of your commitment to coming to classes, even though you hate this, even though you think you're not capable, but you're coming to classes. And that's so good because it's consistency. So praise everything that you can and motivate them every time you can, because that's what keeps them coming back. Sometimes they don't believe in themselves, but the fact that you do and that you give them that love is enough, you know? And then about speaking Portuguese, girl, speak that Portuguese. Speak that fucking Portuguese. Use that Portuguese all you want. You can use that Portuguese all. Yes. I obviously try to every day speak more and more English. So I'm not gonna say oi gente, tudo bem, right? No, that's basic stuff. Because like when you're working in a bilingual school, for example, you notice that the students, they have the operational like the routine vocabulary covered, so they know what is fill the bottle, go to the bathroom. They know what is all the like executive stuff, the stuff that you gotta, I forget what it's called, but all the stuff, the routine stuff they know. But then when they're gonna explain something that's about feelings, they start to speak in Portuguese with each other, you know? So even amongst themselves, they're always speaking Portuguese, but then when it's routine stuff, they speak English because it's just so automatic. So in the beginning, we gotta work on transforming things automatic, making things automatic. So they're so used to saying, hello, what's up? How was your weekend? I ask, how was your weekend every fucking class. So at this point, people know when I'm asking, how was your weekend? You know, but I translated it in the beginning, and sometimes when I'm explaining an activity, I use Portuguese. I don't give a shit because I'm not going to explain things in English and they're going to be like, no, I can't do this. Oh my God. I hate that. I hate that oppressive shit. Like, oh, you can't speak English in this environment, you know like, no, that cripples the person's self-esteem, that already agonizes the person. So don't feel guilty, Rebecca. If you are trying to systematize some things and make every class more and more, filled with English, even if you're using bilingual phrases, even if you say, agora a gente vai start talking about the weekend. Tanto faz, cara. Vai, mete mesmo a frase bilíngue. Uma hora, eles vão estar tão acostumados com isso, and they're going to start to speak English. They're going to start to understand that's in English. So repetition is key, and every day you add a little something. If every class you're adding a little something, then don't feel guilty because they need Portuguese. That whole shit, oh, you can't translate, you can't, no. We forget that. We don't feel guilty about that. Does that answer your questions? Okie dokie. Fee, tell me what's going on.
My question actually was about the use of Portuguese
Mhm.
because I don't know how what how to act. Like when I have a beginner student and they refuse to speak English. And like I know they understand what I'm saying, and they answer my questions. I have the questions there. I'm talking to them, but they and always answer in Portuguese. And I feel strange trying to convince someone who's paying me money to teach them English to speak English. Sounds, and I don't know what to do. Honestly, like, do I say, please speak English, or do I wait for this person to realize and that they should be speaking English?
It's kind of ridiculous, right? Because like you're fucking
Yeah, and
paying a class.
saying it now sounds weird also. So
So the person's paying a class, but they want to speak Portuguese, right? It's just like,
I don't
yeah,
know what to do. What to do? What do I do?
I've
Do
been
I?
there, honey.
Yeah.
I've been there. And everyone, I think, is going to have a student like that at some point. A person that's like, they want to talk about their life sometimes, and they go on and they give like extensive things about their weekend. They tell stories in Portuguese, and then you're just sitting there like, what do I do here? Do I stop this person from speaking? Do I- Jesus Christ, it's insane. I do think they're shy. I think sometimes they're lazy in a certain sense. Not lazy in the bad sense, because lazy feels like a bad word, but I think it's lazy. They're just, not that it's bad, but it's just like they don't even allow themselves to really speak English to go there. Or they just feel like, oh, it's gonna take too much work if I actually try to say this stuff in English, and I want to tell my teacher stuff. And it's like, first of all, I think it's very important to talk to that student, because sometimes we're having trouble with a student, and then we keep on reflecting on how we're having trouble with that student, but we don't tell the student that we're having trouble with them. And of course we need to tell them because they're fucking adults normally, right? So it's like, of course we're going to do it with nonviolence. We're going to do it with, love and all that. We're going to be like, I noticed an objective. We need to make an objective observation. I noticed that sometimes you're speaking more in Portuguese, and I would love to see you trying to use your English more, even if you're mixing stuff and speaking in Portuguese and English together. Like, but I want you to try because we're here for this moment. This is your moment to speak English. This is the only moment in your week where you're going to have a person to speak English with. So let's take advantage of that moment, you know? And this is not the place to be speaking Portuguese, you know? So, and then sometimes when the person is very excited to talk about their routine and or talk about their weekend in English, I try to in the beginning of every class have a lot of moments to unpack their existence like intentionally. So I have a slide that's like a post vacation check-in. So I create some tell me something, I think it's called. So it's like tell me something you did on the weekend. Tell me something you didn't do on the weekend. Tell me something you wanted to do on the weekend and you didn't do. Tell me something you're gonna do next weekend. Tell me something you did last weekend. So then they're like questions to slowly go and say the things that that student wanted to be blabbering on about in Portuguese, but I'm controlling it. And I'm giving it space, but I'm containing it because I don't want him to be like, okay, this is my moment to shine and speak in Portuguese. No, this is my moment to try to say my shit in English. So you gotta like make them know that this is what's happening, but also work on their shyness, like Louisa said. Like work on their shyness, work on their courage. Say this is a safe space. I use that word. I use those words a lot. I talk them to them all the time, saying like this is a safe space. I know that like outside it's okay to make mistakes too. You're gonna, and people are normally gonna be very patient. But here you don't even have to worry. Like make mistakes because this is the place. I talk about babies. I'm like, have you ever seen a baby feeling shy about saying, like batata pálida instead of batata palha? No, the baby is just, and everyone thinks it's cute. So why do we lose that grace when a person gets older? Why do we lose that ability to make mistakes? And then it's like I said before, every day you gotta like kind of like, you know, feed them that information that they need to speak English. But it's fucking annoying sometimes. Yeah, that the person is just like speaking Portuguese in a class that's about English. But you gotta just like rein them in, like, hey, honey, you know? Does that make sense, Fib?
Yes, thank you.
I wish I could be saying something more useful, but like
Yeah, yeah, I know. I when I said it, I knew that there was nothing we can do really to convince someone to do something they're paying you to do. So
right, exactly. It's like you can tell them, you can have conversations, but ultimately, like there was a point with a student that I just accepted that she just wanted to, she wanted a therapist, but she didn't want to go to therapy, so she just like was,
yeah,
and I was talking to her in English all the time, like I was trying to provoke her. We had many conversations, but then at some point I was just like, okay, you want to pay me for this shit? Okay, you pay me for this shit. You know, you know what you're supposed to be doing. I know what you're supposed to be doing. I'm telling you all the time. It's not that I'm not telling you, but like pay me well. If you're paying me 185, 190 per hour, 100 per hour, I don't care. You can talk in whatever language you want, you know? So sometimes she wants to speak in Italian in the class. She starts speaking in Italian. Oh my God. So,
I have this one student that she lives in Paris, so and she's Brazilian, but she's like doing something there. And during our class, I think is the moment that she can speak Portuguese with someone else also. So because during her day she speaks French with French people who actually don't like her. So during our class is the moment she can be free to even speak Portuguese. So I say, okay, I will not do this to you. Come on, just speak Portuguese and be
oh,
free. But I do feel guilty though, because she is paying me and I feel like I'm failing, even though she's doing that herself. But, you know, but that it, thank you. That's it.
you will feel guilty. I think it's normal
Yeah.
to feel guilty. That's okay. But then stop. Just try to gradually stop. If you are holding your part of the bargain and you're like talking to her about that stuff, and even
Yeah.
so, she's like, you know, like you can
Hmm.
even say, I understand that you want to speak Portuguese. If you want, you can pay me more and then we can have like 30 minutes extra just to speak Portuguese. What do you think about that? Like have or 15 minutes to speak in Portuguese. I'd offer, like, because I don't know what percentage it is it,
Yeah.
And what Amanda said, we care more about things than they do. We care more about their evolution sometimes than they do, because English is our life. English is the center of our existence, but it's not the center of their existence, because the minute they finish the call with us, they're already thinking and doing a bunch of other stuff. Even in the last 5 minutes, they're already disconnected mentally. So it's like, you know, we got to accept some things. Like, give me the strength to accept the things I cannot change. That is kind of the prayer that teachers need to be praying every week, to not feel guilty, because we do. We do. But we got to work past it, because it's not our fault, you know? It's not our responsibility solely. There's so much more involved. So, good luck. Oh God. How about you, Louisa? You raise your hand, lowered your hand, raise your hand, lowered your hand, put your left hand in, put your left hand in. So what's going on?
Yeah, it's just some thoughts. I don't know. I was thinking that I think it's easier actually to teach beginners, because I feel that I just have to talk. I mean, to make them to start thinking in English, and whatever I do, that it will be new for them, and they will. I always I like the feeling that I'm helping them some way, and if they are beginners, I think that I have more to offer. I don't know, but I was thinking when Fernanda was speaking, that I really like teaching students with that kind of problem, that they don't feel um courageous. I don't know, they I realize, becoming a teacher, that students are very very afraid of making mistakes, and they don't show this. I mean, sometimes they are afraid, and it doesn't look like they're afraid. And I don't know. I was thinking about this shy feeling, and I like to think. I don't know. I don't have any more to say. I was thinking about this, because this is a huge problem when we talk about teaching, because uh, I, kids, they don't answer us, because they're afraid of making mistakes, and I don't know how to, you know.
Yeah, it's hard, especially if you're working with a group setting in a school, an actual school, or if you have a group online, even so. There's a lot that comes into play, because I feel like Brazilians are very harsh on other Brazilians when they're speaking English. Like, I feel like Brazilians judge each other more than the gringos judge anyone else, which is shocking, right? It's like total colonization syndrome. It's like total síndrome de vira-lata, right? If you think about it. But I absolutely think that that's about creating a culture, a community in the classroom, and a culture of like mistakes are okay. And how do we do that? Because it's not just about saying mistakes are okay, it's about actually validating their mistakes and appreciating their mistakes. And I think it's so cute when my students make mistakes, sometimes some mistakes, and I'm like, oh, that is so cute, I love that. I'm absolutely in love. These, I think I've told you guys this story. These two students, they were like, we're doing check-ins in the beginning of every class. Even if they're beginner, I have a check-in. So in the check-ins, each person, I prompt them on something. Like, I ask how they're feeling, what's on their mind, or what they did on the weekend. So they say it, and then each person in the class has a chance to ask a question about what they said. So regardless of the level, each person is going to say something and ask questions to other people. And then these days, a student said, "Oh, I went to a party," and then the student asked, the other student asked, "Happy birthday?" And then the other said, "Happy birthday!" And then they were like, "Ah!" And I was like, "Ah, that is so fucking cute." That's the cutest thing ever, because it was so automatic. One was like, "Happy birthday," and the other was like, "Happy birthday," and they were like, "Oh, very nice." And then I said, "Oh, you meant to ask, was it a birthday party?" But that is so cute. And I said, that is the cutest thing ever, because you were communicating. Even with your mistakes, you understood each other. So even without all the structure, it still made sense. Look at this. Let me read the chat. Last week, one of my roomies answered "Merci beaucoup" instead of "Merci beaucoup." to me, and I thought it was so cute. Yes, merci Goku. So you see, like creating that culture of like mistakes are beautiful, mistakes can be celebrated because mistakes are a part of the learning journey. And also, like when you're dealing with kids, especially, creating a community of kindness between themselves, of integration, because sometimes like, oh, you make a mistake, so people are going to bully you or stuff like that. So it's very important to assess that part of like, what is a mistake? If you see someone laughing, unpack it. Why are you laughing? Have you never made a mistake in your life? Are you a perfect goddess that came from earth? So it's like not giving space to that, but in general, like, I understand that because they are afraid of making mistakes. Our life, our society is not kind towards the mistakes, right? Like when someone makes a mistake, sometimes it feels like the end of the world. When we're kids and we drop a cup, our parents normally don't say, "Oh, let's clean it up." So it's like, it's hard. You're not allowed to make mistakes in society. Yes, Elivaldo, you're not allowed to make mistakes, and that sucks. But then now we have this new wave of parents that are trying to educate their kids in a better way, of teachers that are addressing these situations. So, for example, when Malcolm makes a mistake, I'm obviously not going to be like, like, okay, I break cups too. So I can't act when I break a cup. I can't be like, filha da puta, eu sou uma arrombada mesmo. I have to be like, okay, I broke a cup. That happens, gee. So it's like creating a culture where mistakes are welcome, and that takes a lot. It's not just one class, but it's one day at a time, but it's a lot. Okay, I'm gonna start calling on names here because y'all are not raising your hands. Karini. Oh, Rebecca. Okay, Karini, you think about your situations with beginner students because your time will come. Rebecca, what's going on?
Yes, and I just want to add something because now I have this new student, and he told me that he needs a method. That was his words in our first conversation, And when he told me that, I asked him, like, what is a method for you? Everything can be a method. We learn in many different ways. So what is a method? And then he told me that he needs to learn step by step. He needs to learn the grammar. He needs to learn fill the gaps and everything. And I was like, okay, I understand. Maybe this is the way that you have been learning your entire life. And I'm going to ask you to trust me a little bit, and we can try something different and see if this is going to work for you. We can try to mix the method that you're used to with the new things and see if this new method, let's try to see this as a new method, mixing things, maybe it's going to work. I don't know. This is like our second class this week, or maybe third. I don't know. So I don't have much to say right now, but have you experienced something like this? Someone saying like, oh, I need a method, like something follow like the grammar, like verb to be, I am I. Now turn this sentence into a negative sentence. Oh my God, I hate that. These kind of things, really. So, and have you ever experienced this?
Oh yeah, countless times, especially before I had the expertise to explain my way of working, before I had the knowledge, the theory to do that. Like, I think that more and more students came to me like that. But then eventually I broke my toxic word of mouth and I started attracting students that were into my new way of teaching because I talked on my Instagram a lot about how I teach and I talked against those methods. So I started attracting people that felt the same way. So that's a very good important thing for future like reference, to talk about that on your Instagram, to explain that, to expose that kind of situation so you can attract students that are more aligned. But now that you have this guy here, you have a few options, right? You can explain to him why you don't use methods. You can bring in the post method discussion, right? Do a little research about post metodo and stuff like that. So you come to class, and you can give it to him. But ultimately, the other option is accepting that maybe the student is a student that is, if you see that he's not really responding and he's looking for the hairs and the eggs, procurando pelo no ovo, and then you're doing your class your way, and then he's like, oh, teacher, no sé, yo estoy evoluindo, and then you can be like, okay, so you know what? Let's do it. Let's do your method. Let's do it. Let's do it. Or let's try half and half, 30 minutes your way, 30 minutes my way. But ultimately, I let the students sometimes have their way. Like if I explain everything, if I have the conversations, if we try and they still don't accept, then either I can say, look for another teacher that is more according to your methods, or I can just compromise and do whatever the fuck they want because they're paying. And then if they're just answering exercises in class, that's less work for me too. So, like, of course, I hate it. Of course, I despise it. But if the student is like fighting with me about it, then, like, what am I going to do? Am I going to tie him up and make him understand? Like, I can do my best, but I can't ultimately make him, you know? But I hate those students because they're like, okay, so why don't you fucking go on ChatGPT? Why don't you go online and you research a method and you learn on your own? Since you know exactly what you want, how you want it, why don't you do it on your own, honey? Why did you look for a professional? Right? I'm like, you're gonna have to trust me, bitch, just like you did. But like maybe the bitch ain't gonna trust you. And then you're gonna have to deal with it. Either you say bye, bitch, or you're like, oh, okay, let's. So you gotta see what you're willing to do at this point. But if he's like a bolsominion and he's like a white bolsominion, straight guy, and then you can be like, yeah. But maybe if he is worth the work. If it's a black person, I'll tell you right off the bat. If it's a black person, then don't let him have his way. It's your obligation to explain to him the colonial constructs, the way that his mentality was colonized into thinking that he. So if it's a black person, I know this may sound strange, but I will fight for them. I will fight for their emancipation. I will fight for them to believe in themselves and to free themselves from these traditional ideas, because I know that's something that's going to set them up for learning in life, right? Because what if he wants to learn French next? He needs to know how to learn from day one. So we need to talk about it. But if it's a white guy that thinks he knows everything and he's like, oh, I need a method, then a rich person, I'm like, mm-mm, mm-mm. If it's a single mom, let me fight for you. If it's a minority, I will fight for your ass. But if it's a white guy, I'm gonna be like, okay, whatever. You know? Just, oh, my price increase and next year, oh, my price increase, and then you charge him like a lot because classes with him are gonna suck anyways. You're like, oh, I'm adapting my prices, and then you charge him more. Honestly, I'm straight to the point. No shits. No beating around the bush. Oh my god. So we have Julia, Elivaldo, and Karine here that haven't said anything yet. So I'm gonna provoke you guys to say something. Karine, do you have anything that's going on about your beginner students that you'd like to share?
Most of my questions were answered because
Mm.
yeah, I don't have a private student yet. Actually, tomorrow I'm gonna start teaching kind of a friend, so it's different. And she's also, I'd say she's A2 to B1, so it's easier than a complete beginner. And as I don't have much experience being the main teacher of a beginner student, because my previous works, I wasn't the main teacher. When I worked at CNA, I was a monitor, so I used to help with. I did work with beginners, but I used to help with homework and these kinds of stuff. And I did use Portuguese, so that wasn't a problem for me, even though they didn't really like people speaking Portuguese with the students. And then I worked as an assistant in an international school, but with kids. And people usually say that kids learn differently, right? They acquire language differently. So I always had this doubt of how I could use the bilingual process that we use with kids that are kind of natural with adults because I don't really know if we as adults we learn the same way as kids because some people say that we don't and some say that we do. So I'm always kind of, I don't know what to do. If we should work like a book or just be natural with them.
Yeah, it makes sense. Your that absolutely makes sense, and I think that's a question a lot of people have. It's something that I was studying during my master's too in bilingualism and plurilingualism. It's like because I came hot with these ideas, like, oh, I'm going to use everything I learned in bilingual schools with adults, but then how do I actually make that happen, right? And then what I noticed is that like acquiring language in the childhood is very different from adulthood because in the childhood you are establishing language normally from zero. So you have no prior language to compare. You have no language, no scaffolding language, right? You only have the language that you're learning all, or even if it's Portuguese and English, you're learning Portuguese and English all together, maybe sometimes, right? And then maybe you have more plasticity, you have less, you don't have bills to pay, so you have less preoccupations. So you are absolutely like involved. You're listening to stuff in English, you're watching cartoons in English. Kids ultimately have the best situation to learn English. They have everything they need. They have people paying their bills. Imagine if someone put me in a house and paid all my bills and took me to an international school, I would learn any language in you know, in a matter of like months because it's just about the availability. So then when you go to adulthood, you have the preoccupations, you have society, you have all the things, you have the trauma that people have acquired about making mistakes, but then you have some advantages, I would say. The big advantage is the scaffolding language. So while people think that Portuguese is a problem, that native language is a problem, it is actually not. L1, language one, is very useful in learning a second language because you have something to compare it to. So it's like garrafa, bottle. It's not just like, okay, I need to understand what is a bottle first, and then I'm going to understand that this is a bottle. Like, you know, like I know that what this is. I know it's a container to put water inside. So I have all this repertoire in the real world that I can use. I also, when I'm an adult, I can write. I can take notes. Kids don't take notes. They have to rely on their brain power, which is awesome because they have a lot of processing power. You know, it's like kids' brains are amazing after puberty. Your processing power just goes down a lot. So it's like, you know, like downward slope, but you still have the artificial memory, which is writing, taking notes, and you can intentionally learn language. Right? Kids, they don't intentionally learn language. And adults have that ability to think about, to reflect on the process, to ask about the process, to ask questions that they don't understand. Kids, normally, if they're making a mistake, it's hard to explain to them that they're making a mistake. You know, you often just expose them to quality input and expect them to rise up. While adults, you can unpack it, you can explain it. So it's like a different scenario. So I'd say it is different. But, anyways, the trick is always immersion and quality input, and, you know, but in adults, I would say it's not harder or easier. It's just really different. But I love teaching adults, like even more than kids, because with kids, I don't have deep conversations in English, you know, but with adults, even if they're beginners, sometimes we can start having some deep conversations like about feelings and shit, you know. So I really love that. Louisa said here. But in a minute. Recently I charged more for a boring job and remembered you guys. It was much easier to work knowing I earned more than usual. And they were rich, white rich guys from SGV. Perfect, beautiful. That's called historical reparation. Oh my god. How about you, Elivaldo? Tell me, how are you feeling about teaching beginner students?
Like Karini said, like all my questions were answered, like the basics, like nowadays I don't have um VIP students, private classes, but my biggest question would be like the actual begin like how am I supposed to approach? Because like we know there are some students that have like vocabulary, but like most of them like out from zero, they have nothing, only the verb to be, and they don't know what the hell is the verb to be. So how am I supposed to talk in English, to speak in English from the beginning? And I loved that you talked about your 21 questions, first
Hmm.
questions, something like that. It is so good because you can like see the level of your student and also like connect with them. So I think the connections the most important thing about like the teaching process in my opinion. And when I started like teaching, I had a huge fear of making mistakes. I even said it to Marcos because like in my head we are teachers, so we're not supposed to make mistakes because we're teachers. We teach people, right? And a lot of teachers, a lot of my coworkers, they used to say, "Man, even the natives make mistakes, and they do it a lot, like a lot. They are worse than us." And I was like, okay, okay. So after like I've been teaching now from a year, and nowadays I'm kinda, starting to change my point of view. And I try to tell this to my students, like, guys, come on. Even the natives make mistakes. So come on, they will not judge you. Of course, 99% of them will not judge you, but 1% we're gonna, we have douchebags around the world, right? But the majority, they will get fascinated by you, a Brazilian, talking English with them. So relax, relax.
Yes.
You can say McFish instead of McFish. You can say bookie instead of book. They will understand you. It's about communication and not, being the master of English like a British or say model.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
thank
I,
you guys, especially you, Bia. You answered all my questions.
I love it. And I love what you said about like even people that have been speaking English for all their lives make mistakes. Like I'm mentoring this girl that she's living in England for like a lot of years already, maybe a decade, and she is dating a British guy. And she said that they speak English obviously together, but she can't expect him to correct her when she makes mistakes because his English is shit too. So he says you was instead of you were. He says a lot of wrong stuff, like I don't got no, stuff like that. So it's really us validating. Like whenever I'm watching Ultimatum, I don't know what it is. I watched on Netflix. It's a reality show for those of you who don't know. Um, there's like a queer version now. There's a queer version. There's like a straight version and a queer version. And like in both, I don't know what's wrong with Ultimatum, but in both, people speak English like so wrong sometimes. And they're all like Americans, but they're all speaking English so bad because I heard that they give them a lot of alcohol. They give like them a lot of alcohol to like make them go crazy. So I feel like the alcohol is maybe to blame because when they're really drunk, it's just like, you know? So yeah, I gotta watch it. And then I feel like going back and recording it and making videos every time I see a mistake. So I'm like, people, look at native people making mistakes. But it just happens. These days I was correcting mistakes with my student. Like I have that class log where I write down the mistakes and then we correct it together. And then he says a lot of like, I I I don't do nothing instead of I don't do anything. And then I'm always correcting him. And then I said, but let me be real with you, Victor, that if you go like into the ghetto or whatever, if you're people are gonna say I don't do nothing and it's gonna be normal. So I'm correcting you here because I'm your teacher and I have this duty to tell you what is the right. But if you're listening to a song, you're watching a movie, people are gonna say I don't do nothing. And then you know, so he's like, teacher, can you tell me when it's a mistake that I can make and a mistake that I can't make? I was like, it's hard to determine things like that, but I understand what you mean and I will. What, for real? It's like normal for them? Yes, yes. Uh-huh. I ain't got nothing to say. I don't do nothing. I didn't do nothing yesterday. Like that is so normal. So, and another mistake that I see, oh my God, it's like, I don't know where this come from, but your guys. What are your or even today I saw something that was like Your guys's. What is your guys's opinion about? I'm like, no, your guys's. Your guys's. And it's normally people from the South. As normally people from the South, they say that your guys is like, kill me now, please. But then it's the Americans saying that. But I'm like, that sounds like a fucking hillbilly. That sounds so bad because it's normally a white person from the South that makes that mistake. But it's like a normal mistake that they make. So like whatever, you know, they're allowed to make mistakes and we're not. Like, what is the cult language for? What is the norm for? Right? Okay, we have Julia and Amanda. Which one of you want to say something or ask something? Nobody? Julia and Amanda? No? Are you listening to me? Can you hear me? No? Okay, she's muted. I don't know. I can't see them.
Hi,
Oh, there you
Jonah.
go. Hi, Amanda. Yes.
I don't know if I have much to add because I have most of my students are beginners, and but I don't know. I feel that I understand that student that Rebecca told that I want a method because sometimes I want a method too because I learned by myself, so I didn't have like now do this, then you learn that, then na 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 na. I even don't know if I know everything that I supposed to know right now. But what I try to do, because the school that I work uh, needs to prepare the students to take the Cambridge exams, is like it's right if you say like this. I'm going to understand. Most of the people around you are going to understand you. Probably native, but you are working to get a certificate that says that you know what you're supposed to know. Like there's writing in some paper somewhere that you need to know the proper way. So I'm going to teach you that. But if you say like uh, I don't know nothing, it's okay too. You're going to understand. Like this, you are going to communicate it. You're communicating, but I need to provide the real communication. And and the thing with the beginners, it's something that is, I don't know, draining my energy this year especially. It's that sometimes they need therapy, and I totally understand them. They are shy. They they don't want to make mistakes. I totally understand, and I totally understand that they come this they have this feeling because in the school we have this feeling. Teachers are always very oppressive with us, and they're all expecting more than you can give, and now everybody's studying like full time, so you don't have free time, you don't have like resting time, and they're overwhelmed, and I am overwhelmed. So like, okay, I understand you need to speak English. And somebody was talking about, I think it was Fernando that said, oh, you are paying for that. My students pay the school for extra class, like it's a program. And I always say that like, you are here for 10 hours in the school, 10 fucking hours. Like, I can't believe, but and you only have to speak in English with me for 2 hours per day. So let's get most of it. Like, if you don't want to say nothing, if you don't want to talk in English, okay. So I don't know, just keeping in your mind that you are throwing away a good opportunity that you're given to because you're not paying, but your parents are. But I'm not doing like the pressure. I'm just explaining like you're supposed to do that because somebody's paying that for that, and it's important for you. And not only because you need to get a good offer of a good job offer, or I don't know, because you want to pass an exam. Because when you know another language, you can communicate better. Like you can search TikTok, you can search on TikTok with more hashtags and understand what people are saying without the subtitles, blah blah blah. Like thinking more what they can reach not only about the job because they are rich, they are don't give a shit about the job, but like culture. So That's it.
I
I don't know if
love
you
it.
understand.
Of course, I understood. And you know what? Julia said something similar. She said she's preparing lessons and she's doing something about like why learn English and what English like opens in your life. And that's something I always tell my students. You know, I have a lot of students at their basic level or A1, A2, and then I ask them these deep ass questions and they want to give me these complete long answers in Portuguese. And they're like, ai, teacher, mas aí como que eu resumo tudo isso em inglês agora? Que eu queria dizer tanta coisa. And I'm like, did you know that is one of the main abilities that being bilingual gives you is the ability to be more objective with your words. So when you practice here and you learn how to shrink your phrases, you're actually acquiring a life skill, you know, because your communication will be more objective in general. You know, they say that it's good to have therapy in your second language because you are distancing yourself from the emotions and you're actually focusing on the more objective parts of your communication. You're not communicating with all the stuff. You're filtering it down. So yes, the fact that they need to speak English, it could be so good for them. It could be so good to learn English, to occupy spaces in the world, to, you know, meet different people, not just natives. Fuck natives. You can meet people in Africa. You can meet people in China. Meet people in Japan. In all the places in the world, and you could speak to them. So you know that's so cool, and it's like showing them the culture, showing them that English is about so many other things. It's about music. It's about movies, and not just like verb to be. But like it sucks that they need to take the Cambridge because like fuck Cambridge. How are you gonna it's totally contradicting, right? You're like embrace the mistakes, blah, 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 but then the school makes them take Cambridge and it's just like decolonization talks go down the fucking drain. So yes, fuck Cambridge. Unless you're an academic. I think if you're an academic, Cambridge is nice. I don't know, not Cambridge, fuck Cambridge, but you have to have proficient English if you're an academic, right? That's the thing. But if you're not an academic, whatever. Who gives a shit, right? But you
And
don't
now
need a
to work and now to work in bilingual school, you have to have one Cambridge certificate. So uh,
you have to have a Cambridge certificate to go receive your 2,000 reais per month. Oh my god.
yes,
Right?
and the exam
Fuck
is
that
like
shit.
1,000, 1,000, blah
Exactly.
blah blah.
Exactly. Fuck that shit, honestly. I'm trying to seduce all the teachers in bilingual schools to become private teachers. But like fuck that shit, honestly. Receiving 2, 3 thousand reais max to humiliate yourself, to clean assets and whatnot. So it's a lot. I've been there and I totally know how overwhelmed you feel because like and working with rich ass people, like, oh my god, also that public is just insufferable. So I get you. But people, I'm proud of you guys. I'm proud because, you know, you already know the way to go. You already know what to do. You just need the validation, the feelings that no, what I'm doing doesn't suck. I know what I'm doing in the end, you know? You see that each of your colleagues are going through similar things. So I love this cooperation and this collaboration. And I'm always excited to exchange with you guys because it's always golden. So I will see you guys next week. And we will be covering teaching advanced students. So bring your burning questions, okay? And we will unpack those. It is always a pleasure. You have a good night, okay, my people? Mwah. Bye bye.
Bye
Thank
bye,
you.
guys. Good night. Thank
Yeah, it's
you.
a pleasure.
You.
Bye.